Let's talk comics. Welcome to the Comically Speaking with Victor podcast. I'm your host, Victor Nunley, and I am the comic hero. With this month being February, and February coming to a close, as I'm doing this is February 27, which is the next to last day, I just felt that it would be right to resume and to cover Black superheroes in comics. So let's dive in. Superman, Batman, Wonder Woman, Captain America, The Flash, Aquaman, The Fantastic Four, Spider-Man, Thor, Incredible Hulk, Iron Man. Now, I just named some of the greatest superheroes of all time. Superheroes whose books that I read on a monthly basis, and I'm quite sure I'm not the only one. But they all have one thing in common. They're all white characters. Now, there's nothing wrong with that, but from when Superman made his first appearance in 1938 all the way to the 60s, there were no superheroes of color in mainstream comics. Now, keep in mind, I said mainstream comics. And there's a reason I say that. Now, mainstream comics, by the way, are books like DC, Marvel, Image, IDW, Dynamite, anyone like that. And for a long time, I, as well as just about anyone else, were led to believe that Black Panther was the first Black superhero in comics. That is both true and it's also false. Now, it's true because he was the first Black superhero in mainstream comics. But if you want to know who the first Black superhero in general was in comics, you would have to go 19 years before Black Panther made his first appearance. Now, there was this African-American journalist by the name of Orrin Cromwell Evans, and he was the first Black writer to cover general assignments for a newspaper in the United States. And the name of the newspaper is the Philadelphia Record. And Evans was also a member of the NAACP and a strong proponent of racial equality. In 1947, the Philadelphia Record closed. And after it closed, Evans decided that he wanted to use the comic book medium to further highlight the splendid history of Negro journalism. And Evans partnered with some of his former co-workers at the Record, including editor Harry T. Saylor, sports editor Bill Driscoll, and two others to found the Philadelphia publishing company entitled Negro Comics Incorporated, with Evans being the president. In the middle of that year, they published only one book, and that was All Negro Comics #1. And it was 48 pages, and it had a glossy color cover with newsprint interior. And it was copyrighted on July 15th of that year, with June of 1947 was an issue date. Now, its press run and distribution are unknown. And unlike other books of that time, it sold for 15 cents rather than a dime. Boy, if only I would have lived back then. Or if only comics only costed a dime, I think I would have more than I currently have. But anyway, the first story in that book, All Negro Comics #1, featured the first Black superhero in comics in general, and that's Lion Man. Lion Man was created by Evans along with his brother, George J. Evans Jr., who did the artwork. Now, his identity is that he's described as an American-born, college-educated scientist. And he was sent by the United Nations to the African Gold Coast, which is now known as Ghana. And he was tasked with guarding a magic mountain containing a massive uranium deposit to prevent it from being used for atomic weapons. Now, he didn't have any superpowers, but he had heightened physical strength, keen instincts, and advanced scientific knowledge. And his sidekick was a young orphan named Bubba, who he later adopted. Sounds familiar, doesn't it? Now, in that book, in addition to the Lion Man origin story, We also see other black characters off in the book, like Ace Harlem, who is a black detective, and Sugarfoot, which is a Sunday Funnies comic strip. Now, there was a second issue, but it was never published. And the reason being was because, I mean, there were some other newspapers throughout the country and in Philadelphia. When they found out about this, they weren't having it. And so they blocked Evans from purchasing what was the record. And that was it. It never saw the light of day. Now, a few years ago, there was a Kickstarter. Somebody started a Kickstarter to reprint All Negro Comics #1. And I've heard that there may or may not be a creative team that's going to go and do a modern day retelling of Lion Man. If they do that, I'm all for it. And heck, I may even buy an original copy of All Negro Comics #1. Now I understand that it's back in print and it's on sites like Amazon and eBay. So I may look that up. Now this angers me. I mean, the whole thing with Evans being blocked angers me because this is something that shouldn't have happened. It angers me when black people, or just about anyone really, aren't allowed to be great. And I just want to get off subject for a minute, but it's unfortunate that there are some white people who are so full of themselves that they don't want to see black people succeed. And a lot of times it's because of hatred, because of racism. And then also other times because they think that we want to take things over. No, we don't. We have never wanted to take things over, and we never want to take things over. All we want is equality. We want the same respect and adoration as the next person. Nothing more. Now, fast forward 19 years later, in 1966, Black Panther came on the scene. And as I said earlier, he was the first black superhero in mainstream comics. He was created by Stan Lee and Jack Kirby and made his first appearance in the Fantastic Four number 52 in 1966. Lee and Kirby had stumbled upon Negro Comics #1, and they added a few elements of that character to Black Panther when he made his first appearance. Now, I would be lying if I told you that Stan Lee and Jack Kirby did not receive backlash for creating this character. Yes, they did. There were a lot of racist readers who had sent death threats to them. Now, Black Panther, ever since then, had appeared in one-shots from Marvel, was a member of the Avengers, had a few miniseries. One notable miniseries that he was in was a 1977 miniseries where he took on the Ku Klux Klan and defeated them. And then there were other volumes of Black Panther. They weren't all that great, but Black Panther really didn't start hitting his stride until 1998, when Marvel released a line of books called Marvel Knights. And with that volume of Black Panther, I mean, the characters started coming in a form and never looked back. And it was written by Christopher Priest. And when Priest took over that book, he gave Black Panther a modern day feel of royalty, with him being the ruler of Wakanda. And then also that's when we saw the introduction of his entourage, the Dora Milaje. Then we started seeing other things, and I tell you, it's never looked back. Now, but ever since then, there have been some other writers that have been on that book, like Reginald Hudlin, Ta-Nehisi Coates, John Ridley, Al Ewing, and Brian Edward Hill. And the character's been riding high. But, I mean, he's been riding high in terms of those who read comics. But for the rest of the world, no one knew who Black Panther was until the Black Panther movie that came out in 2018. Of course, that movie was written and directed by Ryan Coogler, and it starred the late, great Chadwick Boseman. But that wasn't the first time he played Black Panther. He actually played Black Panther in Captain America Civil War, which came out 2 years earlier. But the world started falling in love with the character. And they had no idea that at that point the character had been around for over 50 years. Oh, by the way, with this year being 2026, this is Black Panther's 60th anniversary. He's one of my favorite, not just one of my favorite black superheroes, he's one of my favorite superheroes, period. Now, 3 years later, Marvel decided that if, they came out with a black superhero, okay, but let's come up with but then Stan Lee and Gene Colan in Captain America number 117 said, okay, let's come up with a black American superhero. And of course, I'm talking about the Falcon or Sam Wilson. And throughout the character's publication history, he has been the Falcon. But he first became Captain America as a result of a story arc in which Steve Rogers goes up against this villain called the Iron Nail, and the latter ends up sapping all the super soldier serum from his DNA and causing him to age in real time. And so Steve decided, okay, all right, Sam, this shield's yours. And he becomes Captain America. And there were some folks that weren't really happy with Marvel making that decision. And of course the same thing happens at the end of Avengers Endgame. Steve gives Sam the shield. But he doesn't become Captain America at first. He feels that he just during the TV show the Falcon and the Winter Soldier, he feels that he can't measure up to Steve. But then he finally decided, okay, let's do it. And there are some Marvel fans that weren't all that thrilled about that either. But in the comics, Sam Wilson is currently a Captain America alongside Steve Rogers. He even has his own shield. So there you go. Now you had the Black Panther, who was the first black superhero in comics. Then you have Sam Wilson, who was the first black American superhero in comics. But 3 years later, we end up getting the first black superhero to debut in his own series. And of course, I'm talking about Luke Cage. He made his first appearance in Luke Cage Hero for Hire #1 in 1972. And at one point had gone by the codename Power Man. But then I think somewhere in the 90s, he started going by Luke Cage again and has been Luke Cage ever since. Now, on the big and small screen, he has been played brilliantly by Mike Colter. Now, and there's rumors that he may resume playing the character. And honestly, I hope so, because he killed it on both season 1 of Marvel's Jessica Jones, and then in his own series entitled Marvel's Luke Cage, and then that one season of Marvel's The Defenders. Would really love Colter to come back. Now, anywhere between 1966 to 1993, just about all the superheroes that made their first appearances were all created by white writers and artists. Now, there's absolutely nothing wrong with that. For them to do that took a lot of courage. I mean, especially those that were created in the 60s and in the 70s. However, I believe that unless you have lived the life, unless you have had a black experience, then you only know the gist. And that was something that the late, great Dwayne McDuffie had stressed in the early 90s. And then he, along with Dennis Cowan and Derek T. Dingle, ended up leaving their publications, and they founded Milestone Media in 1993. Now, on the Comic Hero Show, my web series on YouTube, I did this segment where I discussed Cowan and the late great McDuffie, and I want y'all to listen to it. Check it out. Dwayne McDuffie was an American writer of comic books and television, known for creating the animated series Static Shock, writing and producing the animated series Justice League Unlimited and Ben 10, and co-founding the pioneer minority-owned and operated comic book company, Milestone Media. Going on staff at Marvel as Bob Budiansky's assistant on special projects, McDuffie helped develop the company's first superhero trading cards. He also scripted stories for Marvel.
His first major work was Damage Control, a miniseries about the company that shows up between issues and tidies up the mess left by the latest round of superhero supervillain battles. After becoming an editor at Marvel, McDuffie submitted a spoof proposal for a comic entitled Teenage Negro Ninja Thrashers in response to Marvel's treatment of black characters. Becoming a freelancer in 1990, McDuffie wrote dozens of various comics for Marvel, DC, and Archie Comics. In the early 1990s, wanting to express a multicultural sensibility that he felt was missing in comic books, McDuffie and three partners founded Milestone Media. The plain dealer of Cleveland, Ohio, described in 2000 as the industry's most successful minority-owned and operated comic company. McDuffie explained, and I quote, "If you do a black character or a female character or an Asian character, then they aren't just characters. They represent that race or that sex, and it can't be interesting because everything they do has to represent an entire block of people. You know, Superman isn't all white people, and neither is Lex Luthor. We knew we had to present a range of characters within each ethnic group, which means that we couldn't just do one book. We had to do a series of books, and we had to present a view of the world that's wider than the world we've ever seen before." End quote. Milestone, whose characters include the African American Static, Icon, and Hardware, the Asian American Zombie, and the multi-ethnic superhero group called the Blood Syndicate, which include black, Asian, and Latino men and women, debuted its titles in 1993 through a distribution deal with DC Comics. Serving as editor-in-chief, McDuffie created or co-created many characters, including Static. He would later go on to create the Static Shock animated series. Sadly, in 2011, at the age of 49, McDuffie died from complications from emergency heart surgery. Dennis Cowan is a comics artist and animation producer for Queens, New York. Some of his early work included being a regular artist on books like Peter Parker, the Spectacular Spider-Man, Superman, The Flash, and Detective Comics, but gained prominence as the primary artist on The Question, a comic book series written by Dennis O'Neil and published by DC beginning in February of 1987. While at Marvel, he served as penciler on the latter half of the Deathlock miniseries, which was written by Dwayne McDuffie and Gregory Wright, as well as on the subsequent regular title of the same name. He and McDuffie and two others would go on to co-found Milestone Media. In addition to being a comics artist, Cowan has served as a producer on the Static Shock animated series and senior vice president of animation at BET. These two men paved the way for other writers and artists in the black community to take on comics. Without them, the comics community wouldn't be as diverse and open as it is now.
I tell you, if they had not founded Milestone Media, then nothing would have changed with comics. Sometimes you just have to wake people up in order to get through to them. And then that worked. That definitely lit a fire up the behinds of both DC and Marvel. And they realized that if you're going to have a book that features a black superhero, you better have somebody writing it that's lived a life. And the comic book world has thrived ever since. And there have been other superheroes like Storm. Storm was created by Lynn Wein and Dave Cockrum and made her first appearance in John Simon's X-Men #1, making her the first black X-Man. And then Cyborg came on the scene in 1980 and was a member of the Teen Titans. And he was so well received by just about everyone, writers, artists, and then TV producers and TV writers, that he became a member of the Super Friends in 1985 in the show's final season. And then after Superman was killed by Doomsday, one of the Ford that decided to take up the mantle was a character by the name of Dr. John Henry Irons, who later became known as Steel. And Michael Dorn played the voice of Steel on Superman the Animated Series. He was so well received during Reign of the Superman, that he not only did he get his own book, but he was also featured on Justice League Unlimited. In fact, out of the four characters that debuted during the Reign of Superman, he was the only one they used at the time. And oh, by the way, while I'm thinking about it, Dorn also wrote a 6-issue miniseries called Steelworks. And I thought, wow, Michael Dorn can write comics? That's awesome. And while I'm thinking about it, the first black Green Lantern, of course, was John Stewart, who made his debut in late 1971, early 1972. He became a Green Lantern after Guy Gardner was recovering from some injuries that he suffered while he was not being a Green Lantern. He was all in when Guy Gardner wasn't a Green Lantern. He was a school teacher, and he was taking some of his students on a field trip, and they had a bad accident, and he suffered some injuries that prevented him from being a Green Lantern at the time. But don't worry, he got better. And then there was another Black Green Lantern by the name of Sojourner Mulane who made her first appearance in a miniseries by DC called Far Sector, and she was so well received. She is now in the pages of Green Lantern Corps, and I understand that they may or may not utilize her in the upcoming Lantern series that's premiering on HBO and HBO Max later this year. But I tell you, there's a lot of Black excellence in comics, whether they be comic book characters, whether they be writers, whether they be artists. I could just go on, but or I really want to go over the some of the characters that I feel played a even bigger importance in the comic book world. All right, that's all the time I have. Don't know what I'll talk about next time, but just stay tuned. All right, I'm Victor on the Comic Hero. I'll see you next time here on the Comically Speaking with Victor podcast. Till then, be safe, be blessed, be a hero.